We've explored various aspects of Islam and other religions here on FTD Facts, and for this episode, we're looking at some surprising stories found in the Quran, which is the holy book of Muslims. What's going on, everybody? My name is Leroy Kenton, and I have a very interesting episode coming up right now. This is one that you gotta watch all the way until the end. But before I begin, leave a like on this episode if you just love learning about various different religions. And also, if this is your first time here to FTD Facts, hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. That way you'll be notified of our daily episodes. Okay, so let's jump right in, starting with the first story at number 10. The People of the Cave. So the People of the Cave is a story of a group of young people who hid inside of a cave outside of the city of Ephesus, and this was around the year 250 CE to escape a religious persecution. But here's the thing. They got out of the cave about 300 years later. But at the time, they didn't even know that. They thought that they just went to sleep and boom, next morning or next day, whatever. But no, the whole world had changed. Now this story, Aseb al-Kahf as it's called in the Arabic, is referred to in the Quran in Surah 18 verses 9 to 26. But regarding the exact time period that they stayed in the cave, as well as the total number of people that were in the cave, the Quran says that people guessed that they were maybe 3, 5, or 7 people in the cave, plus their dog. And specifically, the Quran says they remained in the cave for 300 years and 9 added. And then after that, it states that God knows best how long they remained there. And the Quran says that the sleepers included a dog who sat at the entrance of the cave, and that's found in verse 18. So yeah, 300 years, was that the exact time that they stayed in the cave? I guess nobody really knows though. So next up, we have the Prophet Suleiman and the jinn. Now the Prophet Suleiman, or Solomon as it's translated in English, was the youngest son of the Prophet Dawood, which is translated to David in English. Now he was born in Jerusalem, and the name of his mother was Saba. Now he was a very talented person, he had a lot of different gifts, and his father made him his heir. Now after the death of the Prophet Dawood, Suleiman ascended the throne of Judea because he had great judgment, right understanding, and a lot of spiritual insight. Now the Quran says this, "And we verily gave knowledge to Dawood and Suleiman, and they said, Praise be to Allah who has preferred us above many of his believing servants." And that's found in Surah 27 verse 15. Suleiman was also given power over the jinn, which are supernatural creatures that are unseen to us humans, but they can shapeshift into human form. And he utilized them in his service, and he was endowed again with special gifts. Even the wind obeyed Solomon when he spoke. Next up, we have the story of the Prophet Yusuf, or Joseph as it's translated in English. Now the Prophet Yusuf's brothers were deeply resentful of his father's love towards him, and his brothers then plotted to have him removed. Now after a lot of planning and scheming and conspiring, they took him and they threw him in a well. Then what they did was that they took his robe and then they put some sheep blood all over it, and they brought it back to the father, who was Prophet Yaqub, and they told him that he was actually eaten by an animal. And this was very heartbreaking for Yaqub, because when he got this news, he cried so much that, he actually lost his eyesight because of this. So fast forward several years now, Yusuf is in Egypt. Now he's in the house of the Aziz, who is the governor of Egypt as well as the chief officer of the king. Now the Aziz bought Yusuf, and he brought Yusuf home and told his wife that they would adopt him as their son. But then his wife was like, wow, this guy's really good looking. He's a handsome man. So she was so attracted to him that she wanted to sleep with him. But Yusuf refused her advances, and so she had him thrown in prison because he refused her. So when he's thrown in prison, he's such a good prisoner that he becomes somehow promoted as the new Aziz of Egypt, and he gets reunited with his brothers that threw him in the well, as well as his father, who thought he was dead. And when she was so awestruck and smitten by the beauty of Yusuf, she told all her housemaids all about this handsome young man, but they didn't actually believe her how handsome he was. So she's like, I'm gonna prove it. So she called Yusuf in. So these ladies now are all sitting there. Yusuf walks in, and they have some fruits in their hand and knives. They're cutting the fruits and everything, but accidentally, they didn't even realize it, they cut themselves on their fingers by accident. But they didn't even realize. You're just like, oh my God, who is this guy? So it's believed that the Prophet Yusuf had half of the beauty of all of creation. Next up, we have the story of the guide. So one day Moses delivered such a very impressive sermon that all of people who heard it were actually very moved. And then someone in the congregation asked, "O messenger of Allah, is there another man on earth more learned than you?" And Moses replied, "No," believing so as Allah has given him the power of miracles, as well as he honored him with the Torah. However, Allah revealed to Moses that no man could actually really know everything that there is to know. There would always be somebody a little bit wiser, a little bit more knowledgeable. So Moses was like, okay, well, can I find such a person then? So Moses ends up meeting a man known by the title Al-Khidr, also known as the guide. So as Moses follows this man, they come across three separate events that Moses didn't fully understand. At one of the events, the guide made a hole in a ship that they were traveling in, and the guide also ended the life of a young boy. And the guide also helped fix a wall in a town where people refused to provide food for himself and Moses when they asked. So all of these events were happening and Moses wasn't really uncertain why they happened, but the guide ended up explaining each of these events to Moses so he can get better understanding of them. So the reason why the guide put the hole in the ship was because he knew that there was this king that stole people's ships if they were in good condition, and of course having a hole in your ship, no one's going to want to take it. And when it comes to the story of the kid, well, his life was taken because it was known that he was gonna cause a lot of evil on the planet, and Allah was gonna bless his parents with another righteous son. And as for the wall, well, the guide helped them build the wall because it actually kept secret a treasure that belonged to these two orphan boys, and the guide wanted to keep the treasure safe because that was their inheritance, and then this way it ensured that nobody would ever steal it, and then the boys would get their inheritance when the time is right. Prophet Eunice is next, also known as Jonah. Now, he was swallowed by the whale that Almighty Allah sent. So Allah called the prophet Eunice to preach to these people that lived in a city called Nineveh. Now, Nineveh was a very great city. It was the capital of Assyria. But only thing though, it had become a very evil and wicked and terrible place. Now, Eunice went to the people there and told them to stop doing the bad things, turn to God, be good, live good lives, but they didn't listen to him. So Jonah was so upset. He was so angry that he just left. He said, "Forget them, I'm gone." So he went and boarded a ship. And as they began to set sail on the ship, they didn't reach far because the storm started to become worse and worse and worse. And the people on the ship, the crew members and everybody, started getting so scared. And now they were pagan sailors, so they thought that they did something to the sea gods. So what they did, they cast lots to see what they need to do, what they need to throw overboard, maybe if they did anything wrong. So the lots kept falling on Eunice, so they decided to throw him overboard into the water, let him drown, who cares, as long as we're alive. That's what they thought. So Eunice is in the water and he thinks this is it. But luckily, Allah sends a great fish that often is described as a massive whale to swallow Eunice completely whole, and eventually spits him out on dry land. But this was only after he stayed in the belly of this fish for quite some time, and Eunice kept praying and asking God for forgiveness and forgiveness. And Allah heard his prayers, and he was given another chance at life. The story of Ayub is next, and that translates to Job in English. So after failing to make Ayub give up worshiping Allah, after destroying all of his wealth, taking the lives of his children, and a whole lot of other evil things, Iblis, or Satan, called on Allah and said, "Oh my Lord, Ayub's wealth is gone and his children are dead, but he is still healthy in body, and as long as he enjoys good health, he will continue to worship you in the hope of regaining his wealth and producing more children. Grant me authority over his body so that I may weaken it. He will surely neglect worshiping you and will thus become disobedient." So Allah wanted to teach Iblis a lesson that Ayub was a very devout person. So he went ahead and he allowed Iblis to weaken his health. But Allah put a condition on it. He said, I give you authority over his body, but not over his soul, intellect, or heart. For in these places resides the knowledge of me and my religion. So Iblis was ready to go. He unleashed all of his force on Prophet Ayub, and Iblis filled Ayub's body with disease until it was reduced to mere skin and bone, and he suffered severe pain. But through all of the suffering, get this, Ayub continued to remain strong in his faith, and he patiently took all of the hardships without complaining once. He did not despair or turn to others for help, but he remained hopeful of Allah's mercy. Even the close relatives of Ayub and friends, they just completely abandoned him. Only his kind and loving wife stayed by his side. And when he needed it the most, she showered him with kindness, and she remained his sole companion and comforter throughout the many years of his suffering. But you see, it wasn't all fine and dandy with their relationship, right? Because Iblis ended up manipulating Ayub's wife, where she even started to doubt at one point because of the suggestions that Iblis was feeding her. So then Ayub was like, I know what's happening. Iblis is manipulating you, stay away. So after all of this, Ayub decides to talk to Allah and just share his heart with God. And Allah decides, okay, now this is enough, and he blesses Ayub with health and wealth and more kids. The story at number 4 is Hamlet in ruins. So the Quran narrates in Surah 2 verses 259 that a man passed by a hamlet in ruins where the people who lived there had died generations earlier. And then he asked himself how God will be able to resurrect the dead people on the day of judgment. Now the Quran goes on to say that God then caused the man to die for 100 years and then raised him to life again. So then God asked the man how long that he felt that he was asleep. So the man replied, maybe a day or half a day. And at that point, God told the truth. Actually, it's been 100 years. So on the other hand, the food as well as the drink that the man had with him were actually still preserved. Like they were perfectly fine. They didn't perish at all. And this was all to show God's power over all things and how God controls time for all things. Now the man's donkey, however, was not only dead, but it was reduced to a pure skeleton. And then by God's power, the bones and joints started fitting together right before the man's eyes. And then the body was clothed with skin and flesh and blood right in front of this guy. So the donkey was brought back to life, and this man is sitting there going speechless. You can't even say anything. Story number 3 involves baby Jesus. Now the Quran says, speaking about his mother Miriam, who guarded her chastity, so we breathed a spirit into her through our angel, and we made her a son, Isa or Jesus, a sign for the world. And that's found in the Quran, Surah 21, verses 91. Now the Quran also talks about how Jesus spoke in the cradle. It says, then she, Mary or Miriam, pointed to him, and they said, how can we talk to one who is a child in the cradle? And then he, Jesus, said, verily, I am a servant of God. He has given me the scripture and made me a prophet. And you can find that in the Quran, Surah 19, verses 29 to 30. So the story coming up next involves the Prophet Ibrahim and his son Ismail. So how the story goes is that the Prophet Ibrahim kept having these nightmares, these just terrible dreams. And in the dreams, he kept seeing himself killing his son Ismail. So he's confused and he's wondering, like, what's this all about? So he ends up eventually telling Ismail, he says, son, I've been having these terrible dreams, and what I see in these dreams is that I'm killing you. But you see, I believe that these are visions from God, not just terrible dreams. So his son Ismail gives an amazing response. And he says this pretty much that, okay, Father, I hear you, I understand, I trust you. If this is Allah's will, then let it happen. It's okay. Just go ahead, tie my hands, tie my feet so I won't resist. And also make sure that you wear a blindfold so you don't see me suffering. And if this is Allah's will, then let it be done. So they both decide to continue with this because they see it as Allah's will. But before Ibrahim is about to sacrifice Ismail, Allah reveals and brings to him this sheep. So they end up sacrificing the sheep instead. And really this whole thing showed and proved that Ibrahim was absolutely faithful to Allah, and he ended up being blessed, as well as his son Ismail. And because of this, Muslims celebrate Eid al-Adha, which comes after Eid al-Fitr. And finally, the number one story I'm going to be sharing in this episode is about the gold cow. And this is found in the second surah of the Quran. And actually, this surah is named Al-Baqarah, which means the cow. So as the story goes, there was a wealthy man that passed away, and he left behind his only son, who inherited his father's wealth. Now his cousins envied his good fortune, and they secretly killed him so that they could inherit it. Now the dead boy's other relatives came to the Prophet Musa, which is Moses in English, and asked for his help in tracing who murdered this boy. Now Moses instructed them to go and slaughter a cow, remove its tongue, and place it on the corpse. And this would reveal the one who committed this crime. But they accused Moses of just making this big joke. What, are you crazy, Moses? There's a whole long conversation that goes on between the Jews and Moses about this whole thing. And they kept asking him questions about the cow and what kind of cow, how old is the cow going to be, what color, all sorts of questions. And Moses tells them that they need to find a middle-aged cow that has no marks and doesn't water the fields. And also he says to make sure that the cow is gold. So after they go and find the cow, Moses told them that they need to slaughter the cow and strike the dead man with a piece of it. And when this happens, like a miracle takes place. So Allah brings this dead guy back to life. And then when he comes back to life, he literally points out exactly who took his life, and then he dies again. Alright guys, so those were 10 surprising stories that you can find in the Quran. It's always very interesting to explore another religion and the stories and how the details are described and linked together and everything. And even some of these stories have like amazing morals inside of them. So definitely I want to hear your thoughts and comments about any or all of these stories that I shared in this episode down below in the comments. Alright guys, so that's it for me. I believe I've said a lot. If you enjoyed this video, definitely you want to check out the video at the end screen. I definitely don't want you to miss that one. Thanks for hanging out with me in this episode of FTD Facts. I'll see you real soon.